Thank you so much for joining us this Thursday morning. I'm Sophie Seck. I'm the Senior Manager for Ethics and Compliance at Medicines Australia. I'm joined by some wonderful people this morning. Lucy O'Brien, who is the Ethics and Compliance Officer at MA. So together we form the Medicines Australia Ethics and Compliance team. We are the people on the other side of the Code Help Desk. Thanks, Lucy. Lucy will be helping with the chat and the Q&A. I'm also invited my dear friend Deborah Monk to join. Deborah is the key code consultant that we really valued during the code review last year, and is and will help today as well. So welcome, Deborah. But with that broad audience, that really large reach that we have, also just wanted to acknowledge that some of you will come to today's session with, an in-depth understanding of Code Edition 20. You may have been involved in, played a critical role in the review of Code Edition 19 last year. You may have been contributing to the development of guidance that we've been working on in the past couple of months. On the other side of the spectrum, we might have people who have not engaged yet in Code Edition 20 and are hoping that this session will give you what you need. Just wanted to acknowledge that broad level of understanding as we roll out Edition 20 today. And we do believe that we have something for everyone in today's session, where we won't be covering everything in a huge amount of detail because of just the sheer scope of work that we need to cover, but we will be pointing you in the right direction to be able to go and find that information yourself. So today is all about the readiness to support you and your current future understanding of Edition 20 and introduce you to some new tools. I do wish to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people as traditional custodians of the land that Lucy and I are meeting on today, and we recognise other people or families with connection to the lands of the ACT and region. I also wish to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have used learning practices such as the sharing of knowledge events that we are hosting today on these lands for thousands of years. As part of the reconciliation journey that Medicines Australia undertakes, we would like you to feel welcome to acknowledge the country on which you are meeting, and the chat box is probably the best place to do so. So this is a snapshot of the agenda. So carving up the next hour and a half, we've got a small component on refresher training. That's just a reminder of where we got to back in November, which was introducing Code Edition 20. Then we will park the slide deck for a little while and take a meander through our new interactive code, which has been published on through our website. Really excited to be in a position to be able to introduce the interactive code today. Then we will take, I suppose, maybe a bigger chunk of today's session on taking a deeper dive into some of the important key changes. They're not the deepest dive possible. So this webinar is not only on scientific exchange, nor is it only on social media. We do have to cover quite a bit, but we will take a deeper dive than just itemising the changes that have taken place. And yeah, if I've done my job well, we'll have time at the end for Q&A. I do need to mention a caveat. So this session, is an educational opportunity offered for industry to keep updated with the code. If we do provide answers or guidance in this session, that guidance and those answers are not binding, and they are offered in good faith. So it is the responsibility of every company to work within the principles of the code and make your own decisions about how your activity, your decisions, and the content that you deliver is appropriate, compliant, and ethical. Great. So let's get started on refresher training. So in November last year, we did host 3 Code Info sessions when we introduced Code Edition 20 for the first time. So those 3 sessions were the same content, but they were delivered Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to 3 different audiences. The main session was recorded and is available on our website as an enduring resource. So today there will be a tiny bit of overlap with that kind of information. Why would there be an overlap today? Because we are 4 months on. We've had a great summer Christmas break, I hope, and it's important to refresh our understanding of Code Edition 20. So Code Edition 20 comes into effect this Sunday. Strange day, I understand, to have a code to come into effect, but 30th of March is always a good date. So all the changes that have taken place between Edition 19 and Edition 20 came about as a result of feedback that we received through an extensive review of Code Edition 19. Those changes address areas where we identified ambiguity, and also to embrace and address changing practices in the way we advertise and engage with healthcare professionals, with patient communities, and with consumers and other stakeholders. Code Edition 20 maintains the principles-based approach that was set out in Edition 19. So why is it important to know? Why do we care? What does it matter? Obviously, by being here today, you already kind of know the answer to that question. You know, these changes impact how companies interact with healthcare professionals, with the media, with the public and other stakeholders. So staying informed ensures compliance, it ensures our conduct is ethical, and it ensures that we are across industry best practices. I'd also like to mention the importance of individual responsibility. So if you are of an innovative pharmaceutical company, then together with your colleagues, you make up and represent that company. So it's not just a company's responsibility, it's actually every individual's responsibility to ensure that the company, the industry, your own behaviour are ethical and compliant. So a mantra that I'm sure you've heard multiple times, but it does resonate with me, is that compliance is everyone's responsibility. It's not just a function of the compliance team. So this is particularly poignant when we are working in a principles-based code. The principles-based code is designed to empower individuals to make principles-based decisions. So not shift all those decisions to the compliance role. And you can also see overarching principle 4, I've pasted there on the slide. This recognises the importance of training and education in order to ensure that we maintain our high standards. So key changes that we have seen in the movement to Edition 20 include, and this is just an inclusion, it's obviously not every single change. Balance. Balance was always there, but Code Edition 20 adds a new subsection that talks to balance, and it supports, through that subsection and that revision of the definition, it supports the application of overarching principle 3. So this is an emphasis on balance, not a new requirement as such. Code Edition 20 removes the minimum PI. So there was a subsection in Edition 19 that itemised what the minimum PI was, and it was listed as an option in the way that one could support prescribing information in product-related materials. So the minimum PI, just because it's been removed from Edition 20 doesn't mean it doesn't exist and it cannot be used and it has to be removed from your material. We're not saying that. It can be continued to be used, but it's not a code requirement. So this move was made to recognise a systems neutral approach and the increasing reliance on QR codes and URLs and working digitally. Also, Code Edition 20 reinforces and articulates some specifics about our relationship with consumer media, and in particular with product-specific media statements. So there's been quite a substantial reinsertion of text that was generated or has its roots in Code Edition 18. with some minor amendments. And I'll go through that in a little bit more detail shortly. Scientific exchange, there have been changes made to scientific exchange. Notably the heading. So it did, in edition 19, it reflected, it was worded in a way that made it sound like scientific exchange could only be undertaken with healthcare professionals. So we have amended that just to be a little bit more open-minded and flexible, that whilst scientific exchange is mainly the domain of healthcare professionals, it might be appropriate in some circumstances to open that field, as well as the section on scientific exchange being revised and clarified. And again, I'll go into a little bit more detail about that shortly. Edition 20 brings in some additions for non-member companies. So notably, the additional allowance for a non-member company to be represented as a committee member on the Code Committee or the Appeals Committee when a complaint is being adjudicated that involves a non-member company. And another addition related to non-members that non-members are asked to put forward a bond when making a complaint against another company to Medicines Australia. Now that bond is returnable should the complaint be upheld. If the complaint is not upheld, we use that bond to defray the costs of our complaints mechanism and the Code Committee, etc. Grants and donations are now reportable. This puts us in line with the 33 countries up there in Europe that do report grants and donations. So it is a boost and an increased requirement on our existing transparency reporting. And complaints and intercompany dialogue, a couple of changes there, or more than a couple of changes there. We've renamed the section, what we used to call abuse of the code is now being called frivolous or vexatious complaint, because ultimately that's what it was. The fine associated with any company being found in breach of a frivolous or vexatious complaint has been reduced from $200,000 to $100,000. We've clarified that the Appeals Committee does not rehear an entire complaint. It only rehears the sections subject to that appeal. And we also have introduced new intercompany dialogue standards, which are referenced in the code and are therefore binding. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail shortly too. Ultimately, the principles-based approach is retained. That doesn't change at all. Nor have we changed the overarching principles. So they are the top 10 overarching principles in Part A of Edition 20. They remain unchanged. Our monitoring activities remain. Now that's another way of thinking about monitoring that we do with our members is to proactively boost compliance. Our complaints mechanism remains in place. And another way of thinking about complaints is it is a reactive compliance mechanism. And lastly, but not leastly, as mentioned before, our transparency reporting remains. So we remain committed to transparently reporting funds that our companies provide to key stakeholders. If you are looking for a summary of those broad changes, then there is a table that is available on our website. It has been up there since we introduced Code Edition 20, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. If you're after a bit more of a thorough mapping of where changes were made, please take a look at that table. And as I mentioned before, the 10 overarching principles that the code leads with in Part A remain unchanged. Ultimately, they ensure that our companies support the quality use of medicines, that we are committed to transparency in our interactions, that our company communications as well as our product-related materials remain current, accurate, balanced, and scientifically valid. that employees are appropriately trained on the code as well as ethical conduct, that nothing is offered to people who prescribe our product that may have an inappropriate influence on their prescribing, that interactions remain professional, in line with legal requirements, and also are appropriate to the audience, that information relevant to prescribing is clearly communicated on our materials, that all promotional claims are consistent with the Australian PI or product information, that all the events that we either host or sponsor are reasonable and appropriate, and that all company activities are clearly identified as a company activity. Now, obviously, that's an abbreviated version of the overarching principles for the purpose of talking about them to you. But we always encourage people well, we remind you not to dive straight into the section that you're looking at, but always map back to the overarching principles that are generally broad and flexible and really set the tone for the code. So that's the refresher training. Hopefully that will remind you of some of the things that we talked about back in November. Let's hop into the interactive code. So I'm really pleased to take this opportunity to introduce to you a new interface which we are launching to support the implementation of Code Edition 20. So you will recall actually about 12 months ago, it was in March 2024, we launched the consultation phase of Code Edition 19. And we did that with a consultation paper where we itemised 7 key topics where we were particularly interested to hear from all our stakeholders about. And one of those topics was the issue of our code guidance resources. So at that time, we had more than 20 individual guidance resources available. They came in all different formats, documents and videos, and that number was building on a monthly basis. So the kind of questions we asked everyone was, how can the accessibility of these guidance resources be improved? How are there other examples from other sectors or industries that we can learn from and that can be useful to us? Could the format of the guidance materials be changed to increase their usefulness? And maybe there are gaps. Well, we knew that there were gaps in the Code Resource Toolkit. What are they, and which ones were most the top priority? So this is generally what we heard. We heard that guidance needs to be linked to the relevant sections of the code. So having them sitting there in one bucket separate to the code wasn't ideal. And the adoption of a similar approach to how the ABPI in the UK roll out their code was recommended. We heard that case studies and examples always remain really useful. We also heard that templates and forms could be separated from guidance and videos. So divide them up to make them more palatable or more easy to find. We heard that all the guidance, all the notes from the help desk, all the recorded code information sessions would ideally be centralised in one place, not some on the member portal available for members only and some on the website available for everyone. We also heard that indexing the guidance up front would help with understanding what what information was there. So a quick glance at a resource to understand what it gives you. We also heard that people wanted clear and intuitive navigation with a searchable function would be ideal, and that videos remain useful, great, etc., but they should not act as the primary guidance on an issue. Just too hard to wade through a 1-hour recorded video to find the information that you're needing. And another question that we asked, sorry, not a question that we asked, but a question that came back to us was when was it time to retire Edition 18 and its guidelines? So obviously when we had Edition 19, we always do keep the previous edition on our website, and we did refer to it because it had a lot more detail compared to Code Edition 19, which was a principles-based code. So we think that potentially now is the time. retire edition 18 and its guidelines. Then we went for it. We hopped in this boat. We gathered all the right people, and that being lots of people from Medicines Australia and consultants and members who are great at design, who are great at IT, who are great at information gathering and crystallization of all these different things. And we had a good play over the summer break. And we're really excited now to be able to share with you the interactive code edition 20. So if you're, feel free to use that QR code. It should take you straight there. I will stop sharing now and see if I can take you on a meander through our website just to introduce you. If you were to start, so the interactive code has its own address if you want to hop straight there and save it. Or you can access it through our Medicines Australia website, just as you did previously. So this is our homepage. Let's go to the Code of Conduct. This should all be quite familiar to you. And this is our menu for all things code. Now up the top here, you can go straight into the interactive code. So let's press on the button and this takes you there, which should be the same place that address and that QR code just gave you. The interactive code doesn't replace the PDF. So over here, we have the PDF of edition 20. We'll always have a PDF, I suggest, of the edition. I've got a printout and I carry it with me wherever I go. So I can click on that, open it up, and that's the edition 20 for you. But I'm not here to show you the PDF version at this point. Scrolling down the screen, you'll see the menu of the code on the left-hand side. You'll also see the menu of the code with all its sections in all its glory, painted here down for your viewing and easy navigation. So let's have a look at, let's pick one, and I'm going to pick events. Let's say that you're in a position of either sponsoring a third-party educational event or you're thinking of creating an educational event. And you really want to understand what the code says about it. So we've clicked on events. On this page, it will tell you what those sections are. Now that's obviously the same menu format that the code walks you through. Now looking down here, you'll see this banner on all pages. It maps and collates all the guidance, all the code info sessions, and all the notes from the help desk that relate to events on this page. So if we were to click on guidance, that will give us 3 different resources that we can look through related to events. If we were to click on code info sessions, you can see that we have one code info session on educational events in the code. And I did want to show you those. Lucy's done a lot of work to pull out the key moments so that you can quickly go to travel and accommodation considerations without waiting through 48 minutes of me waffling on. And this is a new feature for, especially for our non-members who haven't, so this is kind of a monumental day because we are providing all the notes from the help desk that are relevant to Code Edition 20 on our corporate website, on the interactive code for everyone to see and everyone to use. So this plots out all the notes from the help desk that relate to events. I'll talk about notes from the help desk in a sec. So let's cruise down the page. Let's say that you're thinking about sponsoring a third-party educational event. You're reading it and it gives you a footnote here. It's held at a venue selected by a third party as long as the venue has appropriate facilities for holding educational events. That footnote gives you an idea that there is guidance or notes from a help desk or something that you can go to flesh out a little bit more information. So let's click on it. It takes you straight down to, a footnote kind of system. It's highlighted there. And basically, it's going to take you to a notes from the help desk number 25, which is going to offer you up some thinking, some considerations about what you might think about when sponsoring a third-party educational event. In this particular instance, it was about in the Melbourne Cricket Ground. So something that's a little bit tricky. It's not black and white. And obviously that's pretty straightforward. All of those guidances and notes, resources, I should say, are all linked to the code in that way. You can navigate through the code down the bottom horizontally, so you can go back to the previous section, or you can go forward. So that's one way of navigating. Also, you can see that as we clicked on the events button, it's taken us straight down to section 4. So the navigation pane on the left-hand side is also updated to show you where you are in relation to everything else in the code. Hopefully that's pretty self-explanatory and doesn't need too many instructions. So that's the code section. The resource toolkit has also migrated over to this interactive code. So let's click on that. We've divided up all the resources that we have in 4 buckets. We've got the recorded code info sessions, where this session will land in a couple of weeks. We have all the guidance that supports implementation of Code Edition 20. We have all the resources, templates, forms, the whole lot related to transparency reporting, because this is a whole lot when we kind of combine them with everything else that just made it bigger than Ben-Hur. And we have all the notes from the help desk here. So you can navigate to those 4 buckets on the left or through those these buttons here. So let's click on notes from the help desk. This is the cache for where they all live. So there's a whole heap of them. They are ordered in terms of the number that we've numbered, and they're not there in their entirety. We have migrated all of the notes from the help desk that are relevant to Code Edition 20. We have also updated each of them so that we don't refer to Edition 19 anymore. We've adapted and adjusted to ensure that they are fit for purpose. I suppose for those companies that may not have read notes from the help desk before, what are they is a good question. They're not trying to replace or add to guidance, so they're not the same as guidance. They are like a blog style one-pager, short, sharp, to try and kind of flesh out or map out an ethical dilemma. They're not always dilemmas, but they are derived from some of the trickier questions that we receive as the Code Help Desk, especially when the same question's being asked multiple times. We know that industry would benefit from something on that particular instance, and we'll often write a notes from the help desk to be able to respond to that and to be able to provide consistent advice across industry. Yeah, so that's really what Notes from the Help Desk is all about. We're always open to hearing from you if you feel that there are gaps, and we build on them as we need. Let's have a click on guidance. So in the guidance bucket, now you can see at a glance all the guidance, and this one is ordered in alphabetical order. So you click on, let's go straight to gifts, offers, and company branded items, and it will take you straight there. So if you click on that, that will take you to that guidance, and all this guidance has been adapted and revised to adjust to reflect and support you in Edition 20. So there shouldn't be any references to Edition 19 unless we're talking about a transition. Transparency reporting resources, organised guidance, reporting templates and forms. Obviously, I need to acknowledge them. Really only well, not only, but largely it is our members that report transparently. So I won't go into that too much because I know that a good portion of people attending today are from non-member companies. And the code info sessions, they're all there at a glance as well, and you can go through them and access them as you need. At any point, you can go back to the Medicines Australia website. Takes you back to the homepage. There's one more function that I wanted to show you as a search. the search field at the top. So let's use one click, right? And let's see what that brings up as a search function. And one click, I'll talk about that soon. That will tell you that there is a notes from the help desk called mandatory information, one click or two. It brings it up to you there, and it's also going to be linked to section 2, which is requirements for material directed at healthcare professionals. So knock yourselves out. Really want you to enjoy the interactive code, and we really hope that supports your learning. So from our perspective, we think that this represents a pivotal shift in code education. It's a new digital approach that, code. It should become your one-stop code shop. It should enhance accessibility. It integrates the guidance with your code, and ultimately that will improve your understanding of edition 20. It does have limitations, so it is just a portal. It's a platform. It's a library. It doesn't ensure that you understand what you're reading. So this is where the CEP really steps up and provides, an accountable learning experience where a person is asked to engage with the content and repeat back through the CEP, delivered by the University of Tasmania, as to what they understand. So that's much more of a kind of online interactive one-to-one learning module, as opposed to our interactive code. And I do want to say that feedback is always welcome. So we've just gone live with this. No doubt, we'll find some areas that we might find that we'll need to improve, and we're open-minded and really happy to hear from you at any time. Let's take a deeper dive now into some of the important key changes. So let's start with making promotional claims. Making promotional claims is really centred in section 1 of Code Edition 20. There are really no changes in section 1 of Code Edition 20, bar the addition of section 1.1 on balance, and I'll get to that in a bit. So the way that a company thinks about and decides to make a promotional claim is all about substantiation of data, and there have been no changes in that regard. But what we do have is new guidance to support your understanding of how to develop and communicate compliant promotional claims. So that guidance dropped on the interactive code yesterday. It's available for you right now. The content in that guidance document is generated from Edition 18 and its guidelines. It is also generated from the broad feedback that we received through the code review, through a scan of adjudicated complaints, as well as some pretty rich and useful member feedback that we have received in the last couple of months as we've been developing this guidance alongside and being driven by members. So just that pink circle kind of just brings your attention to the flavour of the document. It does go into a lot of detail about using substantiating data to support claims. There are 2 appendix in the document that can be useful. Examples of potentially misleading claims and examples of claims that may be inconsistent with the PI. A lot of complaints that happen between companies that make their way to the code committee invariably will include an adjudication of whether a claim is adequately substantiated or is consistent with the approved product information. So it was a gap that we thought needed to be plugged. I might invite Deborah to take her, to put herself back on video for a sec. And I'll be referring to Deborah to see if she could just give us a quick view of the impact of this guidance and the impact of section 1 on Code Edition 20. Thanks, Deborah.
Thanks, Sophie. As far as impact goes, I don't believe any changes that were made to section 1 will have a huge impact on what companies are doing under the new Code Edition 20. We really hope that this new guidance helps flesh out and explain better for companies how they can apply Section 1 of the Code to their promotional materials. So we hope it's really useful. And as Sophie's described, we did draw on a lot of comments that were provided during the code review and looking back to the sort of guidance that existed under the previous edition Code 18. So yeah, we just really hope it's a very useful resource that's been developed by a working group of Medicines Australia members with their feedback as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Deborah. Thank you. The second area I would like to highlight today is Section 2, promotional material for healthcare professionals. So on your screen there, you'll see Section 2.1, which lays out a uniform set of mandatory inclusions for all product-related promotional materials, claim or no claim. So what is the change? The change is that those mandatories, they are colloquially referenced as mandatory, so required inclusions, they are uniform for all promotional materials, whether they have a claim or not a claim. So that's a difference. Edition 19 had two sets. The other change is that the minimum PI, which was 2.2 of Code Edition 19, if I remember correctly, has been removed. So in relation to this, we do get the question, like, what is sufficient prescribing information? And we would suggest that A through to G is the minimum baseline of what the code suggests to be the sufficient prescribing information. The other changes that you'll see in 2.1 are that we've become more systems neutral. So we've removed any reference to print media and we're trying to use systems neutral language. Another area that comes up quite a bit with questions are, what does immediately accessible mean? This is not a new change in Edition 20. It was always there in Edition 19. But we do, it has been related to the one-click yardstick. And I say yardstick being there's nothing mandated or written that says immediately accessible is defined by one click. But it's a really useful ideology and a useful measure to think about when trying to understand what immediately accessible means. Ultimately, we suggest that it should be upfront, it should be highly prominent, and it shouldn't require the healthcare professional to search or scroll to find that product information. If you would like more information on this, as you've seen from that demo that we just did, we have a notes from the help desk on the one click or two. And we also have some solid guidance on prescribing information in product related materials. Can I pass to you again, Deborah? Do you have any comments on the impact of the changes to 2.1 or Section 2 in general?
As you've shown, the main change is the removal of the minimum PI from the code. But just to emphasise to everybody, it does not mean that you have to revise your promotional materials to remove the minimum PI. If you choose to continue to use the minimum PI in your materials, that's absolutely fine. You can continue to do so. There shouldn't be any major changes to existing promotional materials, but of course it's always good practice to review your materials before you issue them the next time to make sure that they remain compliant with the new code. And this might be more so with small pieces of promotional material that don't include a claim, to make sure that they do include those mandatory information, the mandatory information.
Wonderful. Thank you. So it's now your turn. I'm just going to throw you a really quick poll. It's a yes or no, so not too hard. But a question that's come up in the last year a few times. So the question is, by inserting the above information, so A through to G, the mandatories, in material on your product, does it turn it into promotional material? We would suggest that the answer is no. Promotional material is not defined by by the A to G's. Promotional material instead is defined in the glossary of the code. And just to read that out, it means any representation concerning the attributes of a product conveyed by any means, whatever for the purpose of encouraging the use of that product. So this is a curly question, but it's a good one, because some people were a bit worried about if I include that information, I might inadvertently turn what I didn't expect to be promotional material into promotional material, which therefore, you know, triggers down, has a trickle down effect in the way that you would use that material. So let's move on to balance. So this is a new subsection on balance, and the current definition has been improved between edition 19 and edition 20. So the concept of balance has really just been emphasised. I would suggest, why has this taken place? The majority of the complaints adjudicated by the Code Committee include allegations of unbalanced material. And if a material is unbalanced, it's potentially and probably over-egging the benefits and not balanced adequately by the risks, in layman's, you know, a very short, succinct summary. So that lack of balance is often associated with what is termed to be misleading information. And if something is misleading, then it's probably going to breach the code in a number of places. So it's quite an important concept. And we felt during the code review that it needed a little bit more emphasis. So just being housed in an overarching principle was probably like it undermined the importance of balance. So it has its own section. Balance, it's important to note the balance needs to be considered alongside sufficient prescribing information. So even if you had a promotional product related material that included sufficient prescribing information that we just went through, it might not be compliant because it might not have enough balance. So they are two concepts that need to work together. So that sufficient prescribing information doesn't necessarily provide the balance on a piece. Want to know more? We have a really useful 3-page guidance document on balance that has been updated to address Code Edition 20. In addition, we have a recorded code info session, which was only hosted last year. So it's got some pretty useful examples and walks through a decision framework as to how to make a decision about whether to balance, how to balance promotional material. And Deborah, can I draw on you again? Could you just give us a comment, please, on the impact of this new section?
Again, there shouldn't be any huge impact from the inclusion of this new defined section on balance. The concept of balance has been in the code for many iterations of the code, so there shouldn't be any impact on your materials. It's really just a way of explaining it more clearly for you so that you can make sure that your materials are balanced. But ultimately, the decision on how balanced your material is will be a company decision, and it will depend on different circumstances. And the guidance is there to help you in making that decision about whether I've got appropriate balance in my material.
Thank you. So let's take a leap to 10.1. So Code Edition 20 does take some steps to articulate the relationships that companies have with consumer media, as well as product-specific media statements. So that's it there, 10.1. It's not there in its entirety on the screen, but it does give you a flavour of what it starts to talk about. What's new? The reinsertion of the detail that was located in edition 18. has been reinserted into Code Edition 20, not verbatim. There have been some amendments, but it ultimately does represent additional requirements that were not specified in Edition 19. Why the change? We heard fairly loudly and clearly that industry wanted clarity to be able to instill confidence in interacting with consumer media and posting social media, posting content on social media and making product-specific media statements to a consumer audience. We all know that these kind of activities do run a high risk of promotion if they're incorrectly communicated. And the Code Committee agreed through a couple of different scenarios. They had commented that more clarity in the code was needed on this particular subject. So we now have 10.1. It includes the scope. So 10.1a talks about the scope. It talks about the individual responsibility of a company, what they're responsible for and what they're not responsible for. It also references when a company can make a product-specific media statement, when it's appropriate. And it talks about the frequency and the multiple channels that one might use in order to make a particular announcement at a point in time. I've also posted section E, 10.1E on the screen, and they are required inclusions that the code asks for or expects to see in a product-specific media statement going to a consumer audience. So, I mean, you could colloquially call them mandatories. It's a different kind of context. This is not prescribing information, but they are there. The code then goes on also to talk about what a media statement may include, like that's up to you, 50-50. And it goes into talking about what it must not include. Now, there are obviously more bits and pieces that I didn't post there. So there's 10.1D, and I think it goes through a couple of other aspects as well. It's important to note that in this context, you can link to the consumer media information, which is obviously a requirement that you'll see there as part of 10.1E VII. So we do need a copy of or a link to the product's CMI, but we wish to reiterate that you shouldn't rely on that CMI to satisfy point 6. So a summary of the side effect profiles, the precautions, ultimately all that kind of risk information needs to be embodied in the piece. You can't rely on that being linked somewhere else to provide and to satisfy that requirement. I might just pass to Deborah and we will flesh this out a little bit in the future slides, but I'm just planting the seeds here. What do you think, Deborah, about the impact of these changes?
The impact of the re-inclusion of section 10.1 into the code could be more significant. It would really depend on how much companies were continuing to follow these requirements that were in edition 18 under Code Edition 19. But these sorts of information need to be upfront when you're drafting a product-specific media announcement. It's likely that many media releases that you have crafted over the term of Code Edition 19 will continue or would continue to be compliant with this section 10.1, but they might not have. So because these requirements weren't explicit in Code Edition 19. So this is really, as Sophie's explained, this is really in response to members and other companies' feedback saying we really need something that's a bit more specific, more clear, and also making sure that there's a clear section where product-specific media statements are covered by the code, because there was a bit of an ambiguity as to which section applied to this activity. So now it's crystal clear, and hopefully the requirements are also very clear for companies. Thanks, Sophie.
Perfect, thank you. So moving on to 10.2, in relation to social media. So there have been no changes to the section on social media. So no word changes, except the movement of social media from Part B to Part C. What that means is it used to be in the Part B, which was all talking about interactions with healthcare professionals. And for obvious reasons, we believe that social media is broadly used to communicate with audiences wider than healthcare professionals, and it had a better fit in Section 10 of the code. So we would like to draw your attention to that sentence that I've just circled there. All activities utilize any social media platform will be considered in the same way as more traditional media activities. So the answer, in our view, is A. That social media posts, it means that social media posts are subject to the same principles and requirements as the content we deliver to traditional media, just adjusted for the social media context. So that means if, as part of your multiple channel, single coordinated release, let's say you have a product that's just registered, yeah, you make a product specific statement on social media, it will also need to comply with 10.1. This also means it must include the requirements that we've listed in 10.1E, and I've just reposted those to the left for you to have a look at. And I might just throw to Deborah to just highlight the impact that this will have on industry.
Thanks, Sophie. Yes, this might feel like a fairly substantial change, but it's not intended to be one. It continues the approach that was taken in Code Edition 18, but was omitted from Code Edition 19. So whilst it might feel a bit more prescriptive, it's designed to give companies some really clear guardrails to help you ensure that any product-specific media statement in any media in a consumer-facing audience are appropriate, are balanced, and are not promotional. Thanks, Sophie.
Perfect, thanks. So let's pressure test an example. So what you're seeing on screen is a copy and paste from an example, a mocked up example that we used in a code information session in 2022 on social media. So this is fictitious. There is no such person as Kate Jones, to my knowledge. My pharma company is fake, as is the product. So just an example for mocked up purposes. And we've taken that and we pressure tested it against Code Edition 20. So let's have a look. The product's brand name is there. The active ingredient is there. The approved indications are there. Therapeutic class is referred to. The public funding status is also referred to. We're looking good. In terms of the side effect profile, we struggled. And in terms of the link to the CMI, we struggled. So I would suggest that those two elements didn't feature on this post, should be featured on this post to ensure that that post would be compliant with Code Edition 20. So moving right along, I suppose it's also, as I mentioned before, a summary of that risk information. So point number 6 needs to be included in the post. It's not appropriate to rely on that link, such as a CMI. And this is quite a simplistic, very simple example just for educational purposes. So we're not trying to say that it needs to be this simple or this pared back, but we have had a tinker to the existing template to see where we could make amendments to align that social media post to Code Edition 20. So let's just skip through 1 to 5 because they clearly were in the original post and remain in the original post. But you can see now we have included a sentence there that largely summarizes or brings forward some risk information into the post and does link to the CMI. So it acknowledges that the medicine does have side effects. It acknowledges where you can get more information about any such side effects, and it introduces what some of those two major side effects would be. And that serves to balance that social media content. We would suggest, because this is a social media context and not a product-specific media statement, it does not need to be the full list. So you don't have to, and nor should you, write down the entire list of contraindications and adverse effects in a social media post. It should be shortened to suit the consumer audience and the compact nature of social media. So it's up to yourselves as a company to decide what information is best provided. It is not being used to prescribe, so just be mindful that this is a social media post not intended to encourage consumers to use the product. The intention is to make an announcement and to share information on specific milestones in a company's in a product's life cycle, and it does bring balance to the piece. I could probably suggest that you could also provide that kind of balance. You don't have to put it up front. You could do it a revolving digital banner, for example, or you could shift some of those quotes around so the quote could go at the top and the risk information in the quote. You can move the information around as you need, as long as the piece contains and fulfills at least all those inclusions as stated. So it's really important to remember that transitioning from edition 19 to 20, materials published before edition 20, so right now, don't need updating, even if they are still online. However, if you reissue that content, it should align with edition 20. So from Sunday, all new or reshared content, including social media content, must comply with edition 20. Now, I've just touched the surface of this, and we're expecting you to be intensely interested in this topic. So where do you get more information right now? We have a notes from the help desk on the interactive code about product-specific social media and adapting to Code Edition 20. It does include some more detailed examples. I just didn't want to overwhelm during this code info session. So have a look at those. In addition, we have the IFPMA guidance for social media and digital channels that has stayed on the Code Resource Toolkit for a while. Really exciting is we are on the cusp of being able to publish Medicines Australia social media guidance that members are currently reviewing, offering feedback and driving the development of that guidance. So we expect to be able to publish that in a month, and we will be supporting the release of that guidance with a code info session on August the 21st. Which will be about responsible consumer-facing communication in the digital age. So hopefully that gives you enough information for the time being, with more to come. Okay, I'll quickly run through some of the other things. So scientific exchange, as we mentioned before, there are changes to scientific exchange. The definition has been revised to ensure that scientific exchange is not promotional, and the focus of that exchange needs to be on two-way communication. The Section 7 also includes reference to relevant stakeholders. It ensures that medical directors or their delegate needs to oversee that scientific exchange, and that doesn't mean oversee, it just means have oversight of that activity. And that scientific exchange may be undertaken by non-promotional personnel or people with non-promotional roles. And that is now a new definition that's in the glossary of the code. We do acknowledge that every company organises themselves differently. And so instead of saying commercial, non-promotional role was the better option for trying to broadly capture the variety of roles that are out there. In terms of impact of those changes, Deborah, do you want to, would you like to make a quick comment?
Thanks, Sophie. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Sophie. Again, I don't think there's a huge amount of change for companies with the revisions made to Scientific Exchange. Really is about being more clear but the guardrails are the same as they were previously. The amendments have just tried to improve the clarity of this section and take a much more, hopefully more common sense approach to Scientific Exchange. What has been of most interest and caused most discussion amongst the working group that was developing the guidance was about the concept of the two-way exchange idea, because it's new and there's greater emphasis on this. But it's not an entirely new concept. It's just a way of emphasising that exchange should be an exchange between the two parties, the company on the one side and the stakeholder or healthcare professional on the other, whether that's one-to-one or one-to-many. And that's the important, and particularly if the exchange is going to be a proactive activity by the company, to make sure that there is that element of exchange to emphasise the scientific nature of the discussion. Thanks, Sophie.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. So as Deborah just mentioned, we have new guidance, again, published yesterday through the interactive code. So this is on Scientific Exchange. It addresses frequently asked questions, and you can see some of those there. The two-way communication is lightly addressed in the question 2. Can Scientific Exchange be proactive or only reactive? Well, the answer is it can be proactive, but it does elaborate on that further. In addition to that new guidance, we have the next Code Info session entirely on Scientific Exchange. So we will be going into a bit more detail about what two-way communication looks like and all the kind of bits and bobs around Scientific Exchange. Let's go to section 14 of Code Edition 20, transparency reporting. So the main changes for edition 20 was the change in the transparency reporting schedule, a change in the cadence but not the frequency. So there's still the same amount of reports due every year, but the periods are now starting to align with a fiscal year. There is a new requirement for reporting grants and donations made to healthcare organisations, and we have defined grants and donations collectively in the code glossary. How do we report those grants and donations? They are embedded in the sponsorship of third-party educational meeting reports. So it's not a fourth reporting arm. We have been able to intertwine grants and donations in the third-party meeting reports, all combined in that one Excel document. Sorry, Deborah, to draw on you again.
That's all right.
Would you like to talk about the impact?
As you've explained, the main change here is the addition of the reporting of grants and donations, which came through the review. The members thought that that was the appropriate direction to take, but otherwise transparency should be pretty much steady as we go. And as you've explained, a difference in reporting frame. Again, that was recommended by the members, but it shouldn't be a huge difference, shouldn't have a huge impact on companies.
Thank you. So considering the changes made to transparency, we do have a transition plan to enable us to get to the new reporting schedule and to be able to report on grants and donations. I haven't put the reporting arm of funding made to patient organisations because that remains the same. No changes at all in that regard. Right now, so that circled line just highlights that we will have an 8-month report to be able to bridge the gap between the current reporting cycle and the new reporting cycle in terms of payments and transfers of value made to healthcare professionals. But that really is the only change to the TOV. So there's no other change except for the cadence, the frequency and the cycle of the TOV to HCPs. The trickier one is the third-party meeting educational reports, which are now to include grants and donations. What we're suggesting there is that the 6-month report comes to us on the 31st of August, as you would normally send it into us anyway at that date. But for that final month, from 30th of March to 30th of April, it will include any grants and donations that you have made during that 1 month time. And then we'll move into an 8-month report to be able to bridge the gap between the reporting cycles. We have updated our guidance to support the changes in transparency reporting. So we have a frequently asked questions document that did exist before, but we've added a whole section on grants and donations, as you can see there on the left-hand side of the screen. We've also created a decision tree, which is designed to help channel your decision about whether to report a particular funding into whether it's a grant. And let's say, for example, you make a grant to a patient organisation. Is that reported under grants and donations, or is it reported under a patient organisation? So that decision tree really helps identify the appropriate reporting arm. And the answer is to the patient organisation, if you're wondering. So you're really thinking about the recipient of the funding, if you have to choose, rather than the actual term, whether it's a grant or a donation or a sponsorship. So that's your guiding framework. And then we've, of course, got the transparency reporting quick guide, which is a bit more process driven, but it does explain who you send the reports into, and when, and what happens after that, etc. We do have a new reporting template that has changed in order to cater for the grants and donations. We are trying to keep the grants and donations reporting to be as understandable as possible, but at the same time, we don't need to over embellish. We don't need to step out all the details required. We are literally looking at 4 layers of information: the date or month or year in which that grant or donation was spent, the name of the receiving healthcare organisation, the description or the purpose for that grant or donation, and the total monetary value. So that's really the information that we need to be transparent. And then the reporting template has also changed to reflect third-party educational meetings. There is no additional change. The changes are about reconfiguring the template to be clear. There's no additional requirement that we're asking for. We've just reorganised the way that the information is being gathered and being communicated for clarity and for ease. So all of these, this new template is in the transparency reporting bucket of the code interaction, of the interactive code. And instead of asking Deborah to hop back on screen, I think the impact of this Deborah's already spoken to, but it is important that you download that template for your current report that will be sent to us in August. In terms of intercompany dialogue, there are changes that have been made to section 15 of the code. There are quite a few changes, each to their own, I would suggest, are not majorly significant, but they are designed to equip companies to undertake a more robust intercompany dialogue process. So in summary, the Code Edition 20 now introduces ICD standards, which are described in the code and available in the code toolkit. Acceptance of a complaint by Medicines Australia will not include the evaluation of the quality of that ICD, rather that the ICD has occurred. So we have removed the reference to reasonable efforts to resolve. And also by being referenced in the code, those standards are binding. So we have a new section 15.5 that is about failure to follow the ICD standards. And either company, a complainant company or a subject company, may allege in their complaint to Medicines Australia that the other party did not or breach the code under section 15.5 because they did not behave in accordance with those standards. Deborah, would you like to talk about the impact of the ICD standards in your view?
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. It's really important for companies to be aware of and familiar with the new ICD standards. It might not be important to you right now. You might not have a complaint on foot. You might not be subject to a complaint. You might not be planning to make a complaint, but you need to be familiar with them. So if you ever want to raise a concern with another company about some activity, then you need to make sure that you are following the standards from the get-go before you start initiating that conversation with the other company. And also, if you're going to be, you need to be prepared if you happen to be a complaint lands on in your inbox or on your desk. You need to be familiar with these standards so that you know what you need to do next and how quickly you need to react. And the idea of the standard is to make sure that there's a very clear process for both sides of a complaint in moving forward, in the hope that you'll be able to resolve a matter through the dialogue, or if not, you've got a really clear process, you've given it a good shot before it comes through to Medicines Australia and Sophie.
Great, thank you. So these are the ICD standards. That's what it includes. So it steps out all those things. As Deborah just mentioned, it's really important to consult prior to making a concern to another company. So it does talk about scope, trying to get that complaint in its entirety down pat at the very beginning, rather than a complaint snowballing and moving outside the scope and the other company trying to grapple with a continually changing concern. So really important to keep there prior to making a complaint, and really important to keep there if you're on the other end of a complaint. We have updated the guidelines for industry-generated complaints. So they speak to the ICD standards, they work together. And that document also includes some reference to what happens on the TGA side of things. So if we receive a complaint about a non-member company and the non-member company, as is their right, declines the invitation for the Code Committee to hear that complaint, what happens? What are the consequences? And you know, they are general. Obviously, we can't speak for the TGA, but we do describe those kind of processes that we haven't described previously. We also have another guidelines document that's designed specifically for individuals and non-industry who wish to make a complaint to Medicines Australia. What's coming? We have a code information session scheduled for 16th of October on enhancing intercompany dialogue, and we'll really have a drill down into the science behind complaints, how we ensure our system is independent, fair, accessible, and based on procedural fairness and natural justice, and give you some tips and tricks to be able to work through ICD to be in the best place possible to resolve your dispute and not allow, and therefore not proceed the complaint to Medicines Australia. And that really wraps up some of the key highlights today. I'm really happy to stop talking for a bit, and we don't have too much time for questions. So it's worth noting that the CEP now reflects edition 19. It has reflected, sorry, edition 20. It has reflected edition 20 since January. So semester 1 enrolments remain open and they close on the 2nd of May. And I think semester 2, then there's a period of no enrolments until I think it's June, late June. Semester 2 opens again. So all those dates and costs are on our website. Remembering that Program 1 is a CEP requirement for people in certain roles. Not part of this official CEP, but part of our offering is that we offer a bridging course designed to bridge the knowledge gap from Code Edition 19 to Code Edition 20. Again, it's recommended, but it's not a hard, fast requirement. Enrolments are open. Again, enrolments close for semester 1 on the 2nd of May. I think it costs $115 and takes a smidge over about 2 hours. So that gives you an interactive online self-paced bridging course that just focuses on the changes. So it assumes a pre-existing knowledge of Code Edition 19. And that leaves us till 12 o'clock. Instead of telling you that more information is available on our website, we've got a new QR code and we've got a new interactive code. So I really hope that you go hopping in that boat and exploring, chuck us some feedback, constructive, good feedback, whatever. Any broken links, anything that you come across that you think could be improved, we're really open for feedback. In addition, we've got the summary list of broad changes. They remain on our website. On our website, we also got the code info sessions for 2025 that I've referenced throughout this webinar, and keep in touch via social media channels, websites, and our email address. And Lucy, Deborah, and Sophie, all together and part of the wider MA team who've been involved in the interactive code, thank membership specifically for really helping us get to where we've got to, and really happy to share outside our membership. And welcome to Code Edition 20 as of Sunday. Thanks, everyone.